the microphone.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll try and record it for Cass.
It always fools people with the BBC stuff when they look at it, because the Japanese thing is red on the right.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's crazy. It's crazy, really, isn't it?
But it makes sense, and that was the standard BBC adopted.
Yes, okay.
Kick all the about your internet connection?
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's far from the most fancy you can get now, though. It's not HDR and all that. But yeah, it's not a picture. Right, let's start. So we'll have to jiggle things around a bit, I think, after lunch. So it might be that we do you straight after lunch, and then I'll do a walk around after that.
Yeah.
As long as people aren't shooting off to them.
These mixers are balanced as well, but they're electronically balanced. There's no transformers in them.
Yeah.
They still work though.
Okay. Right, so I usually subject people to a talk on amateur radio because that's kind of what I transitioned into after vintage computing, but I thought we'd kind of flip that, and people probably know bits of the Lake District, but I lived here for, I don't know how long it was, so it's probably about 7 years ago I actually started going out into the hills properly and climbing and up the fells, and so I thought I'd just give you a quick slideshow of some of the features. Now, I took Camille out in the car earlier to the top of Kirkstone Pass, so this was my first ever outing on the 28th of December 2016 up Red Screes, and I'll try and describe these hills. So you go up to top of Kirkstone Pass from Windermere. Red Screes is the big hill on the left. So I was sat in the car park, couldn't see anything. There was a group of lasses started walking on where I thought the path up Red Screes was, so I just kind of followed them up at a distance. And then when we got to the top, it was very icy and very cold, and I turned my radio on for the first time in, well, since I'd had it, I could actually talk to people because I was on top of the hill. So this is my crazy antenna setup. I took a video camera tripod up with me, and I was up there for 45 minutes, and I recognise now that I had onset hypothermia, but I didn't know what that was then. But there's actually rime ice forming on the antenna up there, so you can see it coming off the side of the antenna, which is crazy.
You're not
So,
running enough power if that happens.
so this is Kirkstone Pass Inn, which I think is just about to change hands again. In fact, I think it's going to have a makeover. But that's probably better weather than they normally get up there, and it's famous for the landlords basically becoming alcoholics, and then at some point the pub closes and then it opens again in a few months. So better weather next time. So this is a Hardknot and Rhinos Pass. So Rhinos Pass is here, in this little gap here, and we're over here in the distance. Hardknot's famous for being one of the worst roads in the country, probably is the worst road in the country. So this is actually the summit of Hardknot, which sort of nestles in these groups of mountains. So it's not too far a walk up from the top of the pass, which you'll find actually that a lot of my excursions involve trying to do as little as possible. So yeah, but a beautiful scenery, and there's a little pile of rocks at the top of Hardknot. So this is my beautiful wife. So this is on my birthday a few years ago. We ventured up Helvellyn, and so there's a path up from the reservoir. It's torturous, but it's probably the easiest way to get to the top to one of the highest peaks in the Lake District of that path. And obviously you can see there's cornicing here of the snow, which when it's fully covered in snow, it's very easy to drop off the edge because all there is snow. And I think that's black tarn, so that's looking out towards, you've got Ullswater in the distance here, and then the North Pennines, which we'll see in a bit in that direction as well. Old Man of Coniston, so the other side of Coniston Water, there was a lot of mining, probably the most recent mining activity going on there. So this is a collapsed tower which supported cables which they ran the slate down the mountain in. I think they had to walk up, I don't think they took that as transport, but that's just lying there. That's absolutely fascinating. So, and one of the things I feel luckiest about in the Lake District is being able to pick the time that I go out, and often I've had some of the most memorable experiences in the evening. So this guy here is a mountain rescue guy. He turned up in a pair of shorts. That was it, not wearing anything else. Beautiful evening. There was a cloud inversion, so this is looking out to the west towards Ireland, and there was a cloud inversion, and the clouds slowly rolled in, and then you could see them rolling up Coniston Water, and then eventually filled where the tarn is on the other side of the lakes. And I was fortunate enough to share that evening with Adam Capper, who's a local photographer, so he got some fantastic photos of that evening.
Is that a reflection of the sun then?
Yeah. My phone, it's just on a phone camera. My phone camera did some weird things. You'll see there's some artifacts like that, but yes, there's nothing strange going on down there. This is Pike of Blisco. So up from top of Rhinos Pass, you walk up to the tarn, and then you can turn left up to Crinkle Crags or right up to Pike of Blisco, and this is fantastic. So Pike of Blisco's got two summits, and then you've got this gap in between, and you kind of walk through that gap, and then you get a magnificent view of the Langdales as you get to the top. So there's quite a steep drop off. So again, easy height made by coming up to the top of the pass. And the Langdales are kind of, they're sort of well known for being one of the most picturesque parts of the Lake District, and kind of a lot of summits. There's a guy, Camille, you won't know, a guy called Alfred Wainwright. So Alfred Wainwright basically wrote books about all the fells in the Lake District and spent a good few years of his life doing that. So they're kind of the definitive source. There's 200 and...
I've got one of his books if you want to borrow one.
Right, no, I've got the set.
All right.
There's 214 Wainwrights in his main series of books, and then as he got older, he wrote one final book, which was The Outlying Fells. So it's the easier ones, basically. So we've got some here in the Outlying Fells books. There's 334, I think, in total. So, right, we'll carry on. So, again, top of Kirkstone Pass, that's Thornthwaite Beacon, so it's a big pile of rocks again. It's amazing what you see on top of these hills, and that's looking down from the other side of Kirkstone Pass, Stony Cove Pike, and then you go down and up again, and then you're here, and this is the summit of High Street here on this ridge line here. We'll come back to that in a minute. My favourite summit in the Lake District, St Sunday Crag. So typically you can either go up from Patterdale, so that's on a village on Ullswater, on one side, on the easterly side. On the westerly side you've got Dunmail Raise, which is on the main road to Keswick, where you can get access to Helvellyn as well. And this is looking back from Fairfield, which is a more westerly summit. But it's kind of knife edge, and what I found when I've talked to people who've been on the radio up there is that it can be nice and sunny in Windermere, and the weather can be absolutely horrendous on Sunday Craig. There's absolutely no shelter. There's no getting out of the wind unless you take it with you. So, and that's Grisdale Tarn, which is the highest tarn in the Lake District. It's absolutely beautiful. It's my wife again. So Wansfeld's very popular with the tourists. It's just up from Troutbeck Village. It's very easy to get up there. You tend to find there's a lot of people up there. This is called Baystones. This is the actual summit. It's about 1 metre higher than Wansfeld Summit, which is where all the tourists go. So you've got to kind of walk back towards Kirkstone Pass to get there. And actually, we took this route, which is a really bad route because it's boggy. We got absolutely soaked going up down. Red Screes is a summit I go up a lot. So there was a transatlantic contest and I put my mast up and it snapped. So this is Rain a few years ago holding the antenna up. It's quite rare to get, with low power, quite rare to get contacts, or at the time it was, to get contacts to the States. And George in Vermont came up, and so I said to Rain, hold it up, Rain, hold it up. And he came up so to the point where I could actually talk to him. So we all got absolutely frozen that day. Okay, so Red Screes again, the views from Red Screes are fantastic. So this is looking towards Brothers Water here, down the Ullswater Valley, North Pennines there. Quite a steep drop off this side. You'll see lots of pictures of Red Screes. Winter on Lingmore, which is on the way to Rhinos Pass. Oh no, it's not. No, it's not. I'm wrong. That's Holm Fell. So you're looking north here. You can actually see the Langdales here, the outline of the Langdales. It's on the north edge of Coniston Water, and this is on New Year's Eve one year. And there was this group of miscreants on top. This lady here just completed. This is a 214th Wainwright. So I had a glass of champagne with her, which was great. It was fantastic. And it's obviously it's fairly common to meet people who are very close to completing the Wainwrights. Red Screes again, another year. Again, just the Ryan mice is just amazing. So you can just see the trig point in the distance, yeah, just incredible. And you might only drop down 100 metres and then it all disappears. It's quite staggering. This is Grasmere. So there's a hill called Helm Crag to the north of Grasmere, and this has got various names. So depending on the angle that you're looking at it, it can look like the Lion and the Lamb. So it can look like a lion and a lamb. I think its official title is the Battery because it looks a bit like a gun emplacement. What was the other one out? Helm Crag. What was this piano? There's a piano. Lady playing the piano. Helm Crag. Yeah, I get confused. So that's it close up. This is top of Kirkstone Pass, which I said to Camille earlier. So one winter's day, I followed the gritter up to the top of Kirkstone Pass, and he turned around and then went back down the other way. He wasn't carrying on. So I got up into the snow, and this is that ridge line that I was saying to you earlier, Camille. So just absolutely fantastic winter wonderland for a few days. This is looking out towards Morecambe. You've got Morecambe Bay in the distance here. So this is Stony Cove Pike, and yeah, just phenomenal weather. At times I was basically up to my waist in snow, and I haven't shown a picture, but there was a pair of ski tracks where someone had obviously walked up and then just skied all the way back down again. So this is Lamrig Fell. I've got mate Nigel lives, so this is close to the M6 here. This is one of the smaller summits close to the M6. There's a wind farm there at Lamrig. You might see it sort of T-Bay, just before T-Bay. And these, bless them, this flock thought I was there to feed them. So they just basically followed me for about half a mile. and it was one of those. It was like the weeping angels in Doctor Who. Every time you turned around, they got a bit closer. It was really quite freaky. So yeah, you can see the wind farm here and the Howgills in the background. So that's the start of the North Pennines. Nigel bought all these winter gear, so we were quite snug in that tent. I went to Coniston again. So again, mine works. It's fast the sort of tourist route up if you want to do a hill with some interesting distractions halfway up, especially if you've got kids. That's great. So there's the old mine works there. And then I took a picture of one of the cables where the cart run down. That's just fascinating. Some of them there's no lines on them anymore. They've just kind of almost melded the individual strands over the years.
So what did they mine here? Was it coal or
Slate.
slate?
Yeah, slate. And actually there's some videos on YouTube where people venture into the old mines, and that's quite fascinating. There's some really big caverns, but you have to walk along quite long corridors to get there in the dark. It's quite scary. So, my most go-to summit, this is Gough House. This is south end of Lake Windermere. You can recognise the trig stone because it's got a nick out of it. So it was just a nice cold winter stay, and that's the south end of Lake Windermere in the evening, I think that was. This is once you've gone over Kirkstone Pass. It's just a beautiful day. Took a picture of the other side of Kirkstone Pass. Brothers Water is just on the other side of the pub there. And this is High Street. So High Street is an ancient Roman road. And I always ask this question, so someone might know the answer, but why did the Romans build the roads over the tops of the hills? No. Basically because the valleys were just wooded and marshland. So, as you can imagine, trying to cut a road through marshland. And there's a natural tree line, which you can see on Pillar. There might be a picture. There's very few natural tree lines left in the Lake District, but there was a point where you didn't get any trees anymore, so they always built their roads above that. So it's a fascinating place. It's quite flat. As to sort of say, you get there and you can just be sat behind a wall, sheltered, and it's just like you're sat in a field, but you're at like 900 metres. So. This guy here, we're back to Old Man of Coniston. This guy, I sort of turned back. There's like a very windy path just to get to the summit, and I saw him pushing this bloody bike up, and I was like, "What are you doing, pushing the bike up?" It's just like a standard. I think it's probably steel framed. I think it weighed a ton. And he was just going around doing all the big summits, and he bought a tiramisu with him to each summit and sat and ate the tiramisu. So I took a picture. Also on the Old Man of Coniston, you can kind of see it, but this was during the sunset, and you can actually, you get the shadow of the peak here, and as I was stood there, just watched this shadow just extend out, and I thought, you're really unlucky kind of if you live within this V compared to if you just live half a mile down the road, because the sunset's early for you. So this is, it's gone out in my head. So we're in the Langdales again. This is Jake's Rake, so there's a path up here that cuts through, and it's notorious for people falling off and killing themselves. Basically, we had one year where about 3 people fell to their death. There's a point up here where you kind of have to traverse a solid piece of slate which slopes down slightly, and it just catches people out. So I haven't ever ventured up there, and certainly you would never do it in the wet. It would be silly. So, and this is basically, that's the same town. This is just looking from high raise, which is up another summit up from there. But the geography is completely different here. It's all sort of very lumpy and sort of smooth lumps rather than ragged. Red Screes again, just looking towards Scarfell Pike there in the distance. Red Screes again, so Camille, we came up this road, and that's the struggle there, which is a 1 in 5 road down. You might have heard of the struggle. Alex once, with a team of ladies, pulled the car up there for charity. I do Raynet support as well, radio support for events, and they had a cycle race up there, like a hill climb. Some very sad looking people cycling past me halfway. Gough again, just looking up to the north of the lakes. Gough has got cattle on it, Highland cattle. they tend to stay out of your way, but they're very natural with tourists. But I once they sometimes get close to the antenna, so I once tried to shoo one away, and I really regretted doing that because he wasn't moving. So I just let him naturally wander off. So place fell above Allswater, so this is Glen Ridding down here. So it's very difficult to sort of, you're taking a picture down a hill, but I'm sat there basically just sat looking just straight down the hill at the where the bolt's coming over there. So, and you've got the Helvellyn range in the distance, which you can't see. And this is Place Fell as well. It's just the sunlight on that day was just magnificent. The valleys were just so green and lush. You know, it's not. I've not really messed with that picture much. It really was that green and fantastic. And this is looking back. Kirkstone Pass is here again. High streets that you saw earlier. That's some of the red screes. Okay, I'll just flick through some more. That's Lingmore. So we've got Windermere in the background. So Seat Sandal, this is looking back down at Dunmill Raise. So this is where the road splits if you've ever been up into Keswick. It's very, very steep coming up Seat Sandal. I forget what the name of the hill is on the other side. But just the colours in autumn are beautiful. And that's looking down towards Thirlmere Reservoir. So you've got Helvellyn here. This is Seat Sandal, you've got Fairfield behind you. I've managed to get up there, I think, every year in the evening, and it's always been spectacular. Okay, this is further north in the lakes. The mines, where's the slate mine? Honister slate mine. So this is up from Honister Pass, walking towards Pillar. So you're looking out to the west here now. You've got Buttermere and Crummock Water there. I'm not sure what that is, but this is basically, it's just a boulder field, and what you find is some of the higher summits are just boulder fields. It was very slippy underfoot. This was Boxing Day one year, so in the winter. Just to show how the weather changes, it wasn't, so it's a bit of a crap picture, but this is that's Coniston Water there. This is top of Selside, which is south end of Coniston Water. Just some odd random piles of stones. I don't think that's a benchmark. I think that's just something that someone's put together. Right on the other side of Windermere is Clay Fights. This was one winter I walked over. I can actually walked over the ferry, took the ferry, walked all the way up there. Took my next door neighbour's dog with me. So, and Clay Fights is weird because Storm Arwen basically has just devastated the woodland up there, and they've just cleared it all. So it reminded me like of a World War I battlefield. It was just horrendous. So I'll put some pictures of that later. Great Mel Fell, Little Mel Fell, Penrith basically in the distance there. So to the east side of the lakes, again benchmarks on both of them. It's where the Lake District sort of ends. There's a couple of extra lumps on, and then you're into the Pennines on the other side of the M6. So that's Blencathra. It's got snow on the top. I've got more pictures of Blencathra in a minute. This is Red Screes again. 45 minutes stone staircase to get up there. And again a cornice on Red Screes. Yeah, so that's Alex hunkering down. We're back in the Langdales again. We did all the Langdales in one day. Pavey Ark is the name of the hill with Jake's Rake on, and again you kind of got that sort of rolling, very unusual looking terrain. So just the colours are just amazing. There's a wall that runs right the way across the top of Onesfell. There was a picture earlier of Alex sat base stones with the other summit on the end. Sunset, Onesfell. So I, as well as doing this, I do a Lake District SOTA weekend. So this guy here spends 6 months in California, 6 months in Berwick-upon-Tweed. So we're on top of Helvellyn here, so it's quite a steep drop off to the east, and that is it's not Striding Edge, it's the other one. That's the less extreme way of getting up from Patterdale. You can see the shape of Allswater in the background there. Black Crag, which has got two names. That's just north end of Lake Windermere on the other side of Ambleside. Just watching the sunset again, you can kind of see the Langdales, the profile. It's very familiar. Sunset to the west. I think we're on Pike Oblisco again. So Thirlmere is a man-made reservoir. There's a dam at the other end of it, and there's plaques and stuff. It's quite interesting actually. It's looking towards Skiddaw, north of Keswick. Nice. Don't recognise that. Put that one in. Red screes again. Benchmark on red screes. Right, we'll just flick through. So if it's going to be bitter cold, then I take a towel with me if I'm going to be settled for any length of time. That's looking up along Windermere on a very wintry day. Again, up on Stony Cove Pike when the snow's set in. Let's just flick through a thing. That's my mate Nigel on the Howgills. Black Crag again. So yeah, doing lots of the same hills. I believe that's gone now. There was an AA box at the top of Donmel Race. I'm not. I think it was just there as a. I think you could go in and find anyone. Just there as a historical artefact, but it's gone. I think so. I'm not quite sure why that is. This is Loughrig Fell, just outside Ambleside. I decided to take the tough book up there. It was just a ridiculous thing to do. So that's me doing some data modes. FT8, the amateur radio, guys know what that is. From the top of Loughrig with a radio I don't have anymore. So just a couple more then. Helvellyn. So this is Striding Edge here. This is where people occasionally fall off as well. It's quite a sharp edge, and I did a whole loop around Helvellyn and got back in the dark. It went from that beautiful sort of sunny day to absolutely miserable, and I met this guy on the way back and just froze. Just quite happy to pose for a picture. Beacon again. That's Alex. That's looking down to Brothers Waters, just down here. This is Haystack. So this is where Alfred Wainwright's ashes were scattered. It's quite a nice summit actually. So we're in the west of the Lake District again. Right, we'll flick through because. That's just Crinkle Crags. It's infinity pool, so it just kind of drops off after that. So if you get the angle right, it just looks like the water sort of ends. It's beautiful. This guy here, we've not seen this very often. This guy here was paragliding and he was traversing from north to south. So we saw him kind of fly past and then he was along towards the old man of Coniston. I would imagine it's probably quite a dangerous thing to do in the Lake District because I've only seen one person do it. But, there's Geordie does paragliding school up off sort of Keswick Way, up off one of the shoulders of Skiddaw. So if you ever go up there, you see that. This is Whitbarrow Scar, which is an amazing place. It's a site of special scientific interest. This is to the south of the lakes, right at the south of the lakes, and it's just to the north of the road that runs to Barrow from the M6. So, and obviously you can tell the predominant wind direction, and the geology is just completely different. So you've got this sort of layers of. Well, I'm not a geologist, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, this is Steeple, which is near the summit of Pillar. This guy here is Black Crag. He's got a YouTube channel. He makes some amazing videos. He goes wild camping. He's basically stood there with there's a drone flying around, and he basically took some video footage of me on the top of it while I was doing radio. Just like you can hear him saying, "What the hell's that guy doing?" But it's quite good actually. I got radio, so just the local radio. I got all five of the countries make up the British Isles, so I was quite made up about that. And there is this valley here has got a tree line, so you can see where the natural tree line ends, and it extends there. And you've got the Black Sails, if you ever want to be remote, Black Sails Youth Hostel, which basically you just got to either walk or cycle along this path. You're not allowed to drive along it, and it's nestled here underneath Pillar, so it's very remote. It's usually used by people who are traversing between summits. yeah, again, just totally a different look, very, very rugged. You can see the path here, down here. They introduced the trees, I believe. I don't think Alfred Wainwright was very happy about that. And this is Pillar Rock. So I'd had a plan with Nigel, my mate Nigel, to climb Pillar Rock and do radio from the top of that, but that's never quite happened. It was around COVID, so I need to do that again. And I could just go on forever. So it's just an amazing place, and obviously being on the summits, you just get to see some fantastic. I think we're back in the Langdales there. Yeah, I think this is Paley, top of Paley Arc again. So there's a couple of extra ones. It's the ferry across Windermere. They just dug up the road all the way down to Bowness because they're going to electrify the ferry. They had a fire on it. It's diesel powered. They had a fire on it. It was out for about 6 months last year, before last, was it? Something like that. First electric ferry in the country. Yeah. They haven't got enough power to put charging points for cars in down there either. So. Just on the other side of the lake, you just never know what you're going to find. That's quite. If I stood next to that, I'd be up to about here. Just have no idea why people build these things. So. Top of Rhinos Pass. So there's a stone here called the Three Shires Stone. It's where the three counties meet. So that's quite interesting. Often, when the weather's bad, you're better off staying lower than higher, because obviously if I'm going to do radio from summit, you just end up climbing into the clag and then not seeing anything for a couple of hours. So yeah, that's Langdales again. That's me on Red Screes for an extended stay. Oh yeah, these are the last ones we're going to come to. So there's a little summit called High Rig. As you go to Keswick, as you drive to Keswick, you kind of bear left on the main road. And you can bear right and then end up in Keswick via a longer route, which is called St John in the Vale. So this is Blencathra, and if you've never seen the film of the mountains, Blencathra I think was the first one. It was just amazing. It's just like a year in Blencathra. So there was sort of light snow on the ground on High Rig, but just amazing. So I zoomed camera, so I've got a couple of people on the top of Blencathra just as the sun was hitting it. It's just magnificent. And then this is Skiddaw, so again, just caught a couple of people on the top of Skiddaw, and actually one of the guys who does Summits on the Air had gone up that day and taken a picture, and basically there's a gate that's about this high, and you can just see like an inch poking out the top, so a real struggle I would imagine to get up that day. Yeah, well I think that's it, yeah, just demonstrating how the weather can change, yeah, just love being out in the snow, so roll in the snow. That's the last thing I was going to do. So, in the North Pennines, Crossfell is here. Goes up to. It's called Crossfell, I think, because there's a shelter which is in the shape of a cross. This is the National Air Traffic Service dome on the hill next to Crossfell. So you can actually walk up. There's a road that runs up, but it's not. It's general public. You can walk up to here, and that's basically when the planes are flying to America. That's where they turn and start crossing over the Atlantic. So I think we'll leave it there. There we go.
How many summits are there in the Lake District at Camp Sota, and how many have you worked?
So Summits on the Air defines a summit as a Marilyn. If you know what Marilyn is, it's 150 metre prominence. It gets quite technical, but I think there's 56, and I think I've not done some of them in the north, so I think I'm up to probably about 45, something like that. So, yeah. And as far as the radio goes, I was saying to Camille earlier, so Red Screes, got to Australia from Red Screes with a high power radio, so that's lugging 100 watt radio. But we do it, it drives my wife mad, but when we go on a holiday, you look on the map and see what summits there are around. So we did a summit in Rhodes, which fortunately there was a road all the way up to the top because it was about 35 degrees. We managed to take the scooter all the way up to the top, and it was just magnificent. So. Oh yeah. It's always fun and games going through security control. Coming back from Spain, I think it was. I bought a pole out there which extends to about 6 metres, but it fits in hand luggage because we're cheapskates, we only take hand luggage. And the security guard's like, "What's this?" And he's got it in his hand like that, like a baton. And I was like, "Where's the pole? That's the radio, blah, blah, blah." And he stood there going like this. I thought, he's never going to let me have that, and he just hands it back to me.
Do you not know what's Spanish for hand radio?
No.
Esto radio aficionado.
Oh, an aficionado. Oh, yeah, I might remember that, yeah. Yeah, so. Right, okay, so. How's the lunch doing now? Is that ready? Right, okay. So I suggest we have an early lunch then, and then Camille's going to do a talk about his collection update after lunch, so. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Cheers.
What do you power that stuff with when you go up that?
Sorry?
What do you power it all with when you go up that? I'm thinking car battery.
No. So it's moved on since then. There's a company called Hobby King that do like radio control planes and cars and all that. And you just use those batteries. So so the best ones are LifePo 4s, which are kind of designed to run at like 13.8 volts until you get to like within 20%, and then it drops off. Whereas normal LiPos have got more of a sort of angled discharge rate. But
I'll do you across Atlantic and Australia and...
yeah, so it's for the 100 watt radio I take I've got two 4.2 amp hours I can take, and one of those we run it for about an hour. So yeah, power's not really an issue. And it's I either take a 10 watt, effectively now a 10 watt radio, obviously with a 10 watt radio just that's so. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't say you're packed on at the end of it, you know. Right.
Cool, right.
Okay, cheers. Let's get the camera back on. Have you got OBS on your?
I've got one.
OBS. I can do what I've done with other people's, which is I can just record you on camera.
Yeah.
And then I'll get the trouble is I won't get the live stuff as well. Because that camera just doesn't seem to pick up the telly very well.
Well, I'm not doing a lot of lives.
Right. Right. It's just it picks up reflections. I don't know if I can get it a bit higher to. We'll have a play. Oh, it's the able to know. Which one's that?
That's the second steps.
Right. I don't want to. I don't want to look at pages a bit about the religious factors. So I've not made that one. It's the grey one, which is the one that is.
Well, this is it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, we've done the parts of this one. Yeah, so it's good.
listening to it all, looking at the 308 fuel charge.
I could make some use of those. I've got to run them. If one starts to snow, the grape starts to get milky and then goes back. So if I don't get that before it comes, it stays in the cells.
It comes loose as a kangaroo right to the very top. Down. Sorry, forward down the opens.
MPC down, the same thing as the big bad line. It's the name of it. It's what, sir?
Dave brought
Alright.
Idea it was all text, pure text. Notes, facts and notes, or something like that.
Has it something to do with the name? If your name's going from
Dave dumped that PC there, and he's taking away a lot of keyboard cards, so there we are, just exchanged them. We can just move around the country, don't we? Normally it's drug deals that go down at motorway services stations. We exchange TK-70 drives.
not like £90 £1 note.
Adapters, I saw that over there, I wondered which one it could connect up to. Never actually had a digital laptop, which we technical back, well I did, but they were doing badged into the compact range. Tried to peel the CD off the bottom, so different devices on the bottom. The battery was in like a little tube at that. You started to get into it because you started to get this curve on the top, so it's in that era of packaging.
This is it sharp. That's it.
I must come around and see this.
Just towards the end, once you've got kind of just set
Yeah. Yeah, that's the 84. Isn't it? How do you do it with these big old discs? They are
So instead of climbing, you
well, every time you have an expression, one of them, you have to change the old HDA.
okay.
They all seem to work similarly on the small server test. As soon as you go for it, you read all right, it says that it's off track. So I think it uses the server position. That works okay, and it switches to the read write. Right, I think it's actually
Okay.
So Christopher over there, because I've got a Works 2 and I've just got the front panel of the R8 disc, nothing behind it, so no chance of getting any. So I'm planning to get a Pi inside with this MF interface. But the thing I must have as well is a loudspeaker with disc spinning up. And then when you open the door, the dunk from the... So I'll only put one of those in if I can get sound effects. Audio drives to transmit from the Pi when you switch the disc.
The light.
Oh yeah, that's true. You can do that with the Pi as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what the... it wasn't SCSI used, was it?
MF, wasn't it? I don't... MF. RF drives. If anyone wants some help with RKO5s, I've got an alignment disc and repair pack for RKO5s that contains all sorts of common parts that fail. It's a big box, it's used a lot of RKO5s. Alignment packs and RKO5 disc for loads of diagnostics.
One of our lads did that one.
You did well, maybe you had to swim one.
Clean the graticule with it. Took the lines off it. Well, some of them were printed. It might not have been a deck arcade, it was in the arcade equivalent. Because a few firms did and dry cold it. It was 2.4.
Someone was asking after some just cartridges, so I sent him a few spares I've got. And he said when he got them, he looked on the discs themselves, you can take them out of the plastic, and you can see all where the heads have crashed, all these little skid marks. So he wasn't very impressed, but I said,
The way to do it is to burnish them. So what you normally do is you leave them tinted.
well, it's the sort of thing that happens with the alignment. When you're running just diagnostics on alignment packet, you can see it, you physically can feel the heads moving in like this as the test program runs you. I don't know, I suppose if you have the top off, you can see it moving that way.
As we can get started again.
As long as it wasn't too bad. Quite well,
Yeah, actually, we're ahead of schedule. So. Right, well, we'll start at 12:30 then.
Okay.
Is that right? So just 10
Sounds good.
minutes.
Yep.
Right, okay. Is this working?
Hello?
Camille's going to do a talk and we'll start to talk about after 12. If that's okay, it's about 10 minutes.
All right.
And then
Oh well.
put that on
All right.
Well, it's going to be spindle.
That's it.
The one going out.
want to put my museum
Saved me like
Alright,
50 quid for next year.
Okay.
Something like that.
It's just ridiculous. We used to give things like that.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
To eat waste.
So we were going to put these things we rescued.
Okay, alright.
We'll see you next year.
Is that an Arlo too, or okay?
What was that little box you've got?
Oh, it's ready to CTM. It's a brand new kit, it's a brand new column. It's called Chris. The guy in Russia does it, look on YouTube. It's all kit, and it's Chris Plus.
And then clean the heads again.
Because no one's really
Yeah,
interested
the only problem with
in
the
the chance of needing to take your iPad 1K or 5 to another person who wants to read it.
So you've got to go out and stop waiting.
Well, they are. But then again, you might want to bring a disc that you've had in store for a while.
And it's written on another drive.
It seems to work well. I've not quite finished that one, but the YouTube videos, you can see, everyone's application. Yeah,
How do you do that? If you've got two drives,
but it's not
you've
saying
got
that
two OK.
nice little boxes at the bottom. What's that one to that?
Tweak to align.
To tweak the head, sell it to
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
See you next time.
on the instruction, also got a maintenance instruction, it has got a picture of the scope. And obviously, if you move the head slightly in one direction, you get a better peak. So I guess that's what
You've also got the data to move as well.
You've got 25-hour day.
Data burst. Usually that's a good way in order to do something, then I said no, one way or the other. What was going to happen in the future? If you went through the spec,
work for Davidson, you used to
have to know what you're going to do in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Initially wasn't RK5.
Yeah.
The power station at Frivolous Ferry, they're always a law to themselves.
Data Journal.
It was all equivalent to an RK5. I worked for a company called System.
Did you know Mary Roberts?
Displaying essentially what they were over-generating and looking
And what was his new? I worked with Barry Roberts for years, so I know
the only time we've ever heard of it.
So careful what you say.
Put all the load back
I don't
on
even
these
know if
things,
it's
costing
still
them money.
Yeah.
But then they got to go by digital.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a funny old world.
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah.
So, putting that
So they do it very
30
well.
years with him.
well, effectively in the computer industry.
Yeah, yeah.
But as one,
Well, no, because we've
employee,
the generation of
digital
the,
terms.
So he's coming from Leeds then.
No, I worked in Manchester.
the sales part,
That's just
before they sold it, but also we've contracted, lots of our electricity is contracted. So even though the pool price is ridiculously high, if we
used to be
a guy called Dave for the pool
No,
price,
no, I only knew Barry Roberts because I worked for Institute.
so if we lose a generator on you, well, 2 years into it, we occasionally, by buying an option on buying power,
For him,
to
or
give
were
me
you in design? So you did work for Barry then? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The manager in Manchester. I started in Amsterdam.
Yeah, it's crazy times.
that's for sure.
I've got, ironically, one of the memory cards in my sister memory card.
Well, they were doing some fancy tricks with the back. I don't know a lot about it, but they did it with the 11s. They did some PPs.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's what started.
Because that was when we got this version 4.
Manchester. Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome
On the road.
I've got to
Yeah, so I've started a new company. Occasionally in Manchester. I believe that was changed in the before I went. Yeah.
I thought it was because
Yeah, yeah.
I've had cows.
Yeah, yeah. Students, but Hey?
Slide 1134.
Oh, yeah.
My 11.
Probably going to be better. Just trying to get a reflection off the Camille's going to give some sort of yeah. That buddy connection, honestly. The thing is, it does make or break the talk to a certain extent with Jim's got a sort of, I'm a bit like that, a bit monotonic, and the other guy was a lot clearer. Sorry?
You say we'll have to go for another visit, like
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Right, okay. So that's not too bad. Just have to glue you to the spot, Camille.
Right.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I mean, there's still some reflections, but it's not as bad as it was. Yeah, okay. Right, I just need to sit back a bit. Right, should we make a start?
So are there any of those I should read, Matt, do you think? Those books I should read, do you think? I want to get rich and impress women.
Right, so we'll grab a chair then. Get
A couple of years ago, I ran this kind of
Oh, hang on a minute, I'll just
1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
Oh, we need to turn this around again, don't we? Do we need to turn? Have you done it?
1, 2. Right. So for those of you who do not know me yet, I'm Camille van der Hoeven. I'm from the Netherlands, and I work for a company called VMS Software that is taking care of a bit of DecLegacy in a very literal sense. We've been entrusted with the source code to the OpenVMS operating system, and I've been involved as one of the architects of the port to the x86 architecture. So I've prepared two things for you today. Put it together yesterday, so it's a bit of a last minute thing, but I'm going to show you OpenVMS running on x86 and talk about it a little bit. I'm doing that mainly so that I can tell my wife that this is a business trip. No, she's fine with me going off and having fun at places like this. And then I have a little update on the computer collection, which is the other thing that I do. So I'll show you VMS first. So I'm going to start. This is an Intel-based MacBook. This is Oracle VirtualBox, which is virtual machine hypervisor that runs on the Mac. And it works like this on VirtualBox. It runs on some other hypervisors. Zen, KVM, VMware is a big one. We're almost to the point where we can run this on Hyper-V. We've got it running in the lab, but there's still a few quirks to figure out. And it basically just means that when we run on these virtual machines, we're not that different from other operating systems from a hardware perspective, which always lands good with companies that already have VMware in their store and have hundreds of Windows machines on VMware, and if we can just land in that same ecosystem, it really helps us keep VMS in those companies. So I'm going to power on a virtual machine that has VMS installed. And I'm also going to start a telnet session to connect to the console port. So now this screen basically does nothing anymore, and it's taken over by the serial console, or the emulated serial console. And I mean, this looks, it went really fast. Maybe it went too fast.
No.
But it looks just like VMS booting. And if I log in, oh, right. Just a minute.
Yeah.
Fat fingers.
Password length. It's filling of length,
Yeah, it's just not.
not fat fingers.
Anyway. Oh, it's. Let's try again.
We don't use the same password,
Again, illegal process in it. Anyway, it works, trust me. In a sense, this happening is a bit of a testament to how far we've come, because when you look at this VirtualBox screen, you've got all these different virtual machines there, and each virtual machine there is what we in engineering call a base level. It's where we do a rebuild of the operating system as it's in development. And most of the time these base levels don't last very long. We've got one base level, and then a week later we've got another one with all the updates that have gone in. A base level lasting long enough that you get to the point where your password has expired, that's rare. So what I'm kind of responsible for is a bit in the operating system that sits right at the very bottom of it. And what my bit of software in essence does is it makes the x86 processor look like a VAX. It adds things like the queue instructions, which the x86 processor doesn't have. It adds software interrupts and ASTs, which the x86 processor doesn't have. And most importantly, perhaps, it adds the 4 rings of security that VMS is built upon: kernel, executive, supervisor, user, that x86 doesn't have. x86 only has 2 rings, in essence. It once started out with 4 rings, but they dropped 2 of them. And if you go to 64-bit x86 processors, you've only got 2 rings. There's some other things that VMS needs in its memory management that x86 doesn't offer. Like in VMS, you can have pages that have a user read, kernel write protection, where user mode code can read from the page, but only kernel mode can write to it. That's something that you cannot do on x86. It's either read or write, and it's either user or supervisor. So you can do user write, or you can do kernel write, but you can't do user read plus kernel write. So we basically had to emulate that bit in software, and that's the bit that sits at the bottom of the operating system, because the whole operating system was written with the idea of we're running on a VAX in mind. So these features of the VAX architecture are used throughout the operating system, and basically it was the choice of either changing the whole operating system or perform a little trick to make the x86 look a bit like a VAX. So we didn't allow it. Right now that bit of work is done. It was it's such a fundamental piece to the rest of the operating system that it was one of the first bits that we had to get running before we could do anything else. So it's well fleshed out now. It's been, because we're running the operating system all the time, it's been debugged to, as far as we can debug it. And now I'm working on performance improvements in that bit of the code. I've also done some other bits of code like the scheduler, p-threads, bits and pieces of memory management. But this is the part that I find most interesting because it sits so directly on the hardware. And it's really doing a bit of magic to make a processor look a bit different.
What do you use in terms of languages and tools?
So in terms of languages, we're very traditional. VMS is equal parts, almost equal parts, Macro 32, Bliss, and C. And those are the languages that I use. We also use a little bit of x86 assembler because sometimes you need to do things that you just cannot do from a compiler. There's maybe 15 modules in the operating system that were written in x86 assembler, and 12 of those are mine. So that's all sitting in that bottom layer at the very bottom. I don't really have much else to tell you at the moment. You can buy it. You can buy version 9.2. We actually have one customer who has bought it. That was a bit of a surprise to me because I don't really consider it to be production ready just yet. It's a limited production release, which basically means that don't use it for anything that's critical to your company. It's fine for testing the waters. You can use it for development, for a acceptance test environment, things like that. I personally would not use it in production yet. We're getting closer. At the first quarter of next year, we intend to release version 9.1-2. As far as I'm concerned, that will still be a limited production release. One of the hang-ups is we still do not have all the native compilers that we want to have. That's just proving to be more tricky to put together, and we do not have enough people to do it quicker. And so by the end of next year, I reckon we'll be in a shape where we can actually run production VMS on x86. That's my prediction. That's not a company line, but
How long does it take to build VMS on modern hardware?
how long it takes to build the operating system?
Yeah.
I build pieces of the operating system myself. When I make a change, I just rebuild the bits that I need rebuilding. I think a full build now takes about 2 hours. Okay. Back when Alpha was being developed, it took a few days.
Yeah. Okay.
Back when VAX was being developed, of course, the code base was smaller, but it would have taken a few days there as well, I guess. Even the Itanium build took almost a day. But it's just a matter of throwing more hardware at it and doing more things in parallel. We're still building the x86 operating system on Itanium, so we're not doing any builds on x86 itself yet, because we're also suffering from the lack of native compilers there. Yeah.
You said you were building it by mimicking aspects of the VAX processor.
Yes.
Why not Alpha or
Well,
Itanium?
VAX and Alpha, because the thing is, when VMS was created as a very tight marriage between hardware and software. VAX was built for VMS and VMS was built for the VAX. So when Alpha came around, Alpha was developed by Digital itself, and it was developed with VAX in mind. So bits and pieces were put into the Alpha hardware or into the Alpha PAL code to make Alpha processors have some VAX-like features. Now, Itanium was the first processor that VMS was ported to that was not created with VMS in mind. Fortunately, Itanium did have 4 rings of protection. What Itanium did not have were suitable mechanisms for software interrupts and ASDs. So that was added in a very similar way to what I did for x86 by Burns-Fisher for Itanium. And the starting point when I started investigating how to do this for x86 was the code that Burns wrote for Itanium. And this is just a personal note. I've always wanted to be an operating system developer. And I just learned when I was in university that that kind of job didn't really exist in Europe. So that was sort of a dream that I set aside, and so I was thrilled when I was asked to join the company. And I had this idea that everyone who worked on operating systems was in it for that specific bit that I'm very interested in, which is that software that lives right on the edge of hardened software. That turned out to be very incorrect, that assumption. Most of the software engineers wouldn't touch the kind of code that I write with a 10-foot pole. So Burns-Fisher was, he basically, I went in there with the idea that Burns and I were going to figure out how to do this, and then Burns would end up doing most of the coding. That was my assumption, because I figured that he would want to do that. First of all, he basically sent me off to do a lot of the research, and so I did a lot of the research and came back to him with research and said, well, this is what I found, and I think we can use this mechanism, we can use this bit of the processor. I said, okay, well, go ahead and create a design. And I was like, well, don't you want to do that? Well, Burns said, as much as I would like to do it, it wouldn't be right if I did it, because I'm not going to be around in a few years' time. He's retired since. You will be, and you really need to get this experience, and I have complete confidence that you can pull it off. So that was, it was a bit emotional for me to be sort of entrusted with that level of trust by someone who I looked up to. So in the end, I ended up basically doing it and creating the design, doing the architecture, doing the implementation, writing the actual code, with Burns looking over my shoulder and providing guidance if I got where I got stuck, particularly where I was looking at some of the code that was done for Itanium and couldn't figure out what it was trying to do or why it was trying to do something. So this, for me, this is the job of a lifetime. That said, I propose that we move to my hobby. So the last time I was here, I talked a little bit about collecting supercomputers at home. And what you see here in the background is the card cage of the CPU of my convex C220 supercomputer, which is a dual vector processor, ECL, very power-hungry machine. This card cage dissipates about 25 kilowatts of power in a relatively small space. It's ECL logic. It runs off minus 4.5 volts. And 4.5 volts is provided by 4 big power supplies that run in parallel that are capable of delivering 500 watts each. 500 amps each, I'm sorry, so 2,500 watts. So that's about 12 kilowatts total of the minus 4.5 volts. Then there's the minus 2 volts for the termination, and then there's some other voltages for other stuff. I've prepared a little presentation which is basically a picture show, and as we get to each picture, I'll talk about it a little bit, and I'll gauge the enthusiasm in the room and see how long I should stick to each picture. I told Mark yesterday that I could probably fill 2 hours, and Mark asked me, please don't. So last time I was here, I showed you this picture with these 5 wooden crates that arrived on my doorstep from the US when I got these 4 supercomputers, 2 convex C1s, an Ardent Titan, and an Intel IPC 860. And later I got the convex C220, which I actually got running. I also told you that the 3 first machines, the ones that are in the driveway there, I couldn't get running. So we'll get to that in a bit, because I have a bit of an update on some of those. But first, when you start collecting big machines like this, you need space. And as you can see, this is an old garage building that was there when we bought the house, and it was leaking, and I fortunately did not have any computers in there. I had the foresight not to use that building. But it was really a useless building, so I decided, the museum is on the other side of it, I decided to extend the museum and basically demolish that and replace it with this room. So I had it all nicely figured out and figured out which machine could go, and modeled it all, and then of course your collection expands again and you run out of space again. So I started by taking the roof off, because the roof was just leaking, and from the pictures you can probably tell the sorry state the building was in before I started demolishing it. This is the roof of the museum, of the existing part of the museum, which I also partly redid, but that was still solid enough to mostly remain, but this part just had to go. More demolishing, and then I started rebuilding. Just built a big wooden frame and isolated it. And the inside started looking like this. I put in an isolated floor. I thought of putting in a raised floor for the cables, but that was just getting too expensive. Couldn't really justify that. I mean, this was expensive enough as it was. So I clad the outside with wood. This is it's pine wood that has been put in a bath of acid, basically vinegar acid. And it changes the molecular structure of or the cellular structure of the wood, and basically turns it into a sustainable equivalent of tropical hardwood. So this wood is, I mean, it's entirely sustainable. It's fast-growing pine wood, but it's supposed to last 50 years, and you get a 25-year warranty on the wood, even if it's in contact with water. So pretty impressive stuff. And then on the inside, I put in all these trays for the wiring, and well, you can see the stuff being moved around there. And of course, I put in enough power for it to power everything. So I told you about the supercomputers that I couldn't get going the last time, and I have a bit of an update on some of them, because I was contacted by a collector, well, not a collector, an IT professional in Belgium, who happened to have an Ardent Titan, which is one of the machines that I had that I couldn't get running. And the Ardent Titan, which you can see here, we picked it up along with another few bits and pieces, and the car was really filled to the brim. But the Ardent Titan was the first, Ardent was the first company that combined a supercomputer with vector processors with an integrated graphics subsystem. And the reason they did this was because a lot of users of scientific computers and supercomputers wanted to visualize the results of their calculations. And if you had a computer that could run your calculations in 5 minutes, but had no way of outputting it, then after that you had to put your data on a tape, take the tape over to a graphics capable machine, load the tape, and then you could finally see it. Now, if the computer did the calculation in 5 minutes, but it took you half an hour to take it, put it on tape, and take that over to a graphics system, then you were still using 35 minutes. So this company thought, what if we build a computer that can do the calculation in 15 minutes, so a little bit slower, but then instantly display it. You save 20 minutes. And a computer like that can be built a lot cheaper than a crate. I mean, it wasn't really cheap. This was a $150,000 machine back in 1987. But for 1987, which is like IBM PC era, this was a really impressive machine with very impressive graphics. And I made a video of it, which I will not display completely, because then I will go over the time. I'm just trying to figure out how this works. Hi, this is a I'll take the. I'll turn the sound off because otherwise you'll hear me twice, and that's too much for anyone. So this is this Ardent Titan, and I'm just no, I can't really fast forward. It's just, well, maybe I can. Yeah. So here you see what it looks like when it runs. This is basically taking a page out of the book of the PDPs, just having a light that moves up and down on the back of the processor. And then this is how it starts up. It doesn't look very impressive yet. One of the things I really like about this is it's got a stereo monitor. It's a regular CRT monitor, but it's got an LCD panel in front that changes the polarization of the light, and it does so very rapidly. And then you display the left image with vertical polarization, then the right image with horizontal polarization, and you just wear glasses with Polaroid lenses, and as many people as you want can wear those, and you just look at the screen and you see everything in 3D. Well, if you're outputting 3D output, of course. I'm trying to find my mouse. Anyway, I'll show you what the graphics capabilities are. This was the first computer, or the only computer ever, that was shipped in the box with MATLAB. Because Cleve Moeller, who was the founder of the MathWorks and the developer of MATLAB, also did some consulting work at Ardent, and he figured that this would be a great match. So in 1987, if you ran MATLAB on any machine, all you would get were wireframe graphics. You couldn't get shaded graphics back then. That came a few years later on other platforms. The Ardent was the only platform back then where you could get shaded graphics because the machine was fast enough for it. So I actually made a video about this, and Cleve Moeller at MathWorks picked it up and wrote in his blog about it. But this is a Mobius ring created in MATLAB, and so you basically use a special output device to draw it to, and then you get it shaded like this. And then you have the knob box with these little dials, and in this video I've drawn it and I'm just rotating those dials. And being able to do this back in 1987 was really impressive. This is before Silicon Graphics started doing their workstations. It's just really smooth, and there's this second Ardent was used in a biochemistry lab, and so there's a piece of software that came with it called Biograph, where you can basically enter a molecular structure, and it will draw the molecule, and you can draw the electron cloud around it. You can do all sorts of interactions which I do not fully understand because I'm not a chemist. And you can do that with a 3D output. MATLAB doesn't use 3D, but if you put the 3D screen in front, you can use Biograph with that. And it's just really impressive looking if you have a large DNA molecule on your screen with the electron field around it, and you could just rotate that and zoom in and do whatever you want with it. So, little sidestep. Convex. I had some Convex machines, and I found that Steve Waller, who founded Convex, later founded another supercomputer company, and he wasn't very creative naming-wise because he just took the next letter from convex and created a company called Convey. And this is much, much later. This is late 1990s. And I just happened to find this machine on an auction site and paid $10 for it, paid $50 for shipping, and I got it. And that was just the top bit. The bottom bit I had to add myself, and that cost me more, though it's a much less interesting part of it. But what they did, I'll show you the inside. What they did is they basically created a coprocessor for an x86-based computer. And the whole box is one coprocessor. And it's got these 8 very large, these very large FPGAs. And they were the largest FPGAs that they were available on the market at the time. Those chips are $10,000 each. They put 8 of those in. And then they have memory modules that also have FPGAs on them. And the idea here is that there are a lot of problems that do not neatly fit into 30 or 64-bit computers. If you're doing DNA sequencing, for instance, you're dealing with 4 letters of the alphabet. A 2-bit computer would be ideal for that. And the idea here is you've got these honking big FPGAs, and if you're solving a problem that requires 64-bit arithmetic, you can put maybe 20 processors onto those 8 FPGAs, synthesize them. But if you're dealing only with 2-bit data, then you can maybe put 1,000 small processors onto these FPGAs. And then the bottleneck becomes memory, because modern memory usually access per cache line. So every time you talk to this memory, you get a whole bunch of data. You can get that really fast, but if you need a little bit of memory here, a little bit there, a little bit there, that's really not very fast with modern memory. So what these memory modules do is they're pretty much byte addressable, and the FPGA just routes everything so that you can get bits of data from multiple different parts of memory at the same time. So I think I have a, yeah, so this is these are the big FPGAs. And so memory modules with the FPGA on them. Then this is, yeah, this is just video of how it boots. I'm still trying to, I got in contact with some people at Convey, and I got a hold of the operating system for this machine. It's basically a standard Linux, but with special drivers for this coprocessor. What I haven't got is the compiler to actually synthesize code for those FPGAs. So while I can boot the machine and basically verify that it's all operational, I can't actually do any computations on it yet. I'm still working with them to get that, but they're a bit apprehensive in handing this stuff over. Even though Steve Wallach, the founder of the company, basically said you can have it. Problem is, the company has been acquired by Micron, and Micron does their own FPGA-based accelerator cards, and they probably still use some of this technology in their products. So they're, I can understand that they're a little bit anxious about giving that away. Well, you can find this on YouTube if you are interested in it more. So this is another system that's very interesting. This is also has to do with DNA sequencing. This is a system that came from the Sanger Institute, where it was used as part of the Human Genome Project. And what you're looking at here is 2 chassis made by a company called RLX, and they're filled with these cards. And these, this is what the back looks like, connected to a big network router with these fat cables that each carry 24 Ethernet signals. And what you're basically looking at is the very first blade server. So these little boards that slide in are, each one of those is a computer, a server. And there's 24 in a chassis, so with 2 chassis you can have up to 48. I've got 32 of them running now, the rest of them are broken. But you basically, you have all these network connections coming out of the back, but you can manage them as a whole, and there's a special management network interface. So the first card is a management card that runs some special software, and from there you can boot all of the other ones. Each card has 1 or 2 2.5-inch hard drives on it for the OS. So given that I was looking at the contents of these hard drives, and I found out that they came from the Sanger Institute, and found out that they were used for the Human Genome Project. So I decided to use them for similar work again. So I installed a Ganglia cluster manager, which is a clustering system that's meant for biochemistry clusters. And I forgot to take a picture of that, so I can't show it. But I ran BLAST on these machines, which is a, basically you have a whole genome database living on the machine. And the way it works in a cluster like this is that that database gets distributed. So every node gets a tiny portion of the database. And you enter a DNA or RNA sequence into the front end, and it just does a quick search to see whether it finds any complete or partial matches. So you have a patient who has a certain virus, you do a DNA sequencing of that virus, you enter the code into it, and it basically tells you what it is, or what it closely matches. So I put on I created a subdomain for my website, blast.vaxbarn.com, and when this machine is up and running, which it currently is not because it takes a lot of power, but when I do power it on, you can go to the website and submit your own BLAST searches. And it's all software from the late 1990s, the way they would have run it at Sanger. The other supercomputer I couldn't get working at the time was the Intel IPSC 860. And the reason I couldn't get it working was because I did not have this machine, which is the head node or the cube resource manager. Now, I'm going to take my VMS jacket off and show you my t-shirt. This is, the t-shirt I'm wearing is a design made by Tomiko Thiel to visualize the structure of the Connection Machine 1 supercomputer, which is a hypercube. Now this Intel is not a connection machine, but it is a hypercube. The Connection Machine 1 had 65,000 CPUs, so it was a 16-dimensional hypercube. The system I have is a 4-dimensional hypercube, but it can be up to a 7-dimensional hypercube if you add more cabinets. So, just a little look at the inside. These are the node boards. Half of those have an Intel 860 processor on them, and the other half have a Intel 386 processor on them, so it's a hybrid machine. These are I/O nodes, so you have every node has 8 possible connections to neighbors. 7 of those are used to form the hypercube. Well, and in this case, because it's only a 4-dimensional one, only 4 of those are used. The 8th one is reserved for connections to these I/O boards. And they're basically also a 386 processor, but they come with a SCSI controller, so you can connect to some local disks. Now, node 0 has a link that goes to the Cube Manager, which is that Intel 386-based PC that I showed. This is the back of the system. So all the interconnections are basically done within the backplane, and you've got these cables connecting the backplanes together if you need to use more dimensions in the cube. And just to visualize the structure, this is what this hypercube looks like. So you've basically got one cube connected to another cube at all the edges. And then the SRM is connected to node 0, and then nodes 2 and 10 and 6 and 14 have I/O nodes connected to them. And these I/O nodes together form a distributed file system, so you can get software or get data into the system quickly. But really the whole system is managed from that SRM. That is responsible for loading software onto all the different nodes. I was also very fortunate that I was in a Facebook group, and someone had posted a picture of an old Intel IPSC computer, the IPSC-1, which is the 286-based predecessor to this system. And that was also incomplete, and someone else posted a picture of the cube manager for the Intel IPSC-2, the system I was looking for, in a picture comment, and basically said to complete it you need something similar to this, but not this, because this is for a later generation machine. At which point I saw that and I replied, I know exactly what machine that is for. I have one of them and I am missing this cube manager. I've been looking for one for ages, and I basically gave up because these systems are very rare. So I got in contact with the guy who posted that picture, and he was like, oh, I've been looking for a good home for this. I'll just ship it to you if you pay the shipping cost. But it had to come from the States, so it was fairly expensive to get it shipped. But it came with a lot of software. So yeah, so this is the workstation with a special interface card. This is one of the node boards in the machine. So this is the 860 processor. This is a memory expansion, and then this card that's full of Xilinx chips. That's the communications module. I can go on and on about the IPSC 860. It was really, Intel didn't intend to sell this machine. It was developed originally as a prototype called Touchstone Gamma for the US military. And they wanted a computer called Touchstone Delta, and this was sort of like an intermediate step using old infrastructure from the IPSC-2 and just plugging in the Intel 860 processor. The communications network is a bit of a bottleneck because it's not fast enough for the 860 processors. That's why Intel never intended to sell this machine, but when customers found out that something like this existed, they wanted it, and the rest is history. Like I said, it came with a lot of software and documentation, which really helped in getting everything going again. Unfortunately, the software was all on these quarter-inch cartridge tapes. And quarter-inch cartridge tapes are probably the most unreliable tape system I'm aware of. Maybe second to exabyte. They suffer from a few issues. One of them is there's a rubber band that goes around the tape to move the tape. The capstan roller doesn't touch the tape itself, it touches a wheel that then moves a rubber band, and the rubber band moves the tape. Now the rubber band, after a few years, disintegrates. You touch it and it crumbles. Pieces of that rubber band get stuck to the tape, and you can't get them off very nicely. Plus the tape suffers from shedding, which is when the tape basically absorbs moisture from the air and it starts sticking together. And what happens when you try and read a tape like that without properly treating it first is that bits of magnetic material, you've got this tape on a loop. Magnetic material is supposed to be inside, and it ends up sticking to the outside of the bit of tape that sits against it. So it basically, you get spots on your tape where there's no more magnetic material and no more data. And you get bits where there's magnetic material on both sides of the tape, and you get bits that shouldn't be there. So fortunately, I was well aware of this problem before I got these tapes. because I've run into this before, and I knew some of the recipes on how to fix this. So first, you basically take the cartridge apart, carefully take the magnetic band out, and then you bake the tapes. You put them in an oven at 85 degrees centigrade. To be safe, I do it for 24 hours. I just let it sit overnight, pick it up the next evening, and then you've got these nice dry tapes. As soon as you take them out of the oven, though, they start absorbing moisture again, and if you leave them for a few weeks, they'll be back to their original state. So after that, this is like one of the most nerve-wracking jobs ever. You basically have to put those tapes in place and then put the rubber band, or a brand new rubber band, this green one is just new, it's got the right size. You have to put it back in place, and you use different small wooden sticks to keep bits and pieces in place. You swear a few times, and then finally you've got it on, and then you've done one tape. The other thing is these metal stands. The tape also tends to stick to those. So I actually bought, what's the material called? Really smooth.
Silicon?
Not silicon. Tyvek.
Okay.
I bought a self-adhesive Tyvek tape, and basically just cut really small bits of it and put it around all those metal posts. And then, rather than risk running it through the original tape drive, which is also 30 years old and probably has gooey rubber rollers and everything, I put them through a tape drive that I trust, that I maintain specifically for this purpose, and that I have multiple of in case it fails. So I created tape images. There was also, and the software that runs on the Intel 386 workstation is a special Unix System 5 for 386 version put out by Intel. And to my knowledge, these tapes are maybe the only copy of that left around. So I had tape images. I had no way of getting them onto the workstation itself. And the way you install this Unix is you need to boot from floppies first. There was a hard disk in the workstation, but it was shot. It was no good. I tried several different ways in my toolkit to recover it, but I couldn't. So what I ended up doing is I took PCEM, which is a 386 emulator, and I added a tape drive emulation to it that matched the tape controller that was in the Intel system. And I basically used that with the tape images and the floppy disk images to install the operating system onto that emulator.
Wow.
Took the disk image, put it on a CF card, and then put a CF to IDE card. This is the only thing that's not original in this Intel system is the CF card that sits on this IDE controller. Back in the day, the system had an ESDI hard drive disk controller. I've just replaced that with an XT IDE controller with this CF card on it. And that way I got the system going again. And I'm now talking to a guy who at MIT developed a ray tracer called Tachyon, which is fairly well known because it was the first parallelized ray tracer that was created as a university project. And that was originally developed on an Intel IPSC 860, Intel Personal Supercomputers, IPSC. And I'm in contact with this guy, and he dug up some old versions of his source code, and we're close to getting something that I can compile on this machine. More interesting things started showing up. Someone had a Honeywell 4500 24-bit mini computer. I won't talk too much about this, but this system basically ran the largest oil refinery in Germany between 1973 and 2011.
Wow.
It lasted all that time, and then it was finally replaced with something more modern. It's a beast of a machine to get going. I'm slowly getting there, but I'm missing a bit of firmware where the original firmware chips have rotted away and the data is no longer there. I'm trying to get it, but I'm not very hopeful for this machine. But it's very neat looking. Then when I got a phone call from the University of Aachen in Germany, and they have a chair of process control systems where they play around with PLCs and things like that. And that chair is funded by the Siemens company, and they had some old Siemens equipment that they wanted to get rid of. And on the left is a picture of their student lab where they've basically created this process that you can control using different kinds of PLC technology. So lots of different PLCs vendors have put in their equipment there, so you can use an ABB system to control this process and learn about how ABB control systems work, or you can use something from Schneider and figure out how Schneider does it. But originally this was a Siemens bulwark. So I took the Siemens stuff home, and what it turned out is that these are process control systems, but one of them was the 10,000th process control system that Siemens ever produced. And basically to celebrate that, they donated this system to the University of Aachen to use in a student lab. And this was the first time that they actually had a real big process control system in the university for the students to play with. So just the fact that the system has this tag on it that says it's the 10,000th one is kind of interesting. And so I've put it on the wall. There's a second one that's next to it. And then these are these wonderful operating systems, very colorful displays. And I'm working with Bernd Ullmann in Germany, who knows a lot about nuclear physics. And the idea is that we're going to use one of these teleperms to emulate a nuclear reactor, and then use the other teleperm to control the processes there, or at least part of the process, just model it.
One of my jobs was to create nuclear simulators.
Oh, cool.
And conventional simulators with Siemens, who used to work for Siemens.
Oh.
So we have complete emulations of teleperm M, teleperm ME, teleperm X.
Right. Yes, so this is teleperm M. And it hooks up these wonderful 5¼ floppy drives with a carry handle. Once it's loaded, and as long as the battery in there is still good, it just keeps that programming. Now this was a temporary setup on some blue crates because I wanted to make it look nice. And then later I repurposed some furniture from my daughter's bedroom that she no longer wanted. So this is the streamlined control system that takes up a bit less space.
175 gram computers to 125K for the graphics controller.
Right.
And we had 10 of them installed at our power station. We only ever rebooted, in 10 years we only ever rebooted 2 of them.
Right, that's impressive.
Those machines are built like brick.
Yeah, it's a very interesting programming technique.
Yeah.
You basically have all these building blocks that you select from a library, and you connect the inputs and outputs together, and you configure the bits and pieces. It's quite unlike other programming languages I've used.
You have to think German.
Yes, probably, yes. I was
Yeah.
expecting a system like this to use something like ladder logic, but it doesn't. It's very different from a PLC. This is really sort of a supervisory control system.
It uses step M and things like that.
Right.
They have their own languages.
So these were the things that I wanted to talk about, and then there was other stuff that came in over the last 4 years. I have pictures of those. I'm just going to go through them, and if you see anything that sort of tickles your interest, you can ask me about it. Otherwise, I'll keep silent. Otherwise, I will be here tomorrow. Yeah, this is from a, I can't help talking.
No.
This is from a Hitachi M680 mainframe, which is an IBM plug compatible, but much faster and air-cooled. Univac card punch. Mechanically, it appears to be still sound, but someone ripped all of the electronics out of it before I got it. PDPs, RLO2s, disk packs, things like that. Big IBM head disk assemblies from mainframes. This is the 3380, and that was the very first hard disk ever to break the 1 gigabyte storage barrier. Right now, of course, we have terabyte hard disks. This weighs a ton. Someone came in with a few Unix workstations. These are pretty much looking for a good home, because they don't really fit in my collection all that well anymore. This is an IBM System 36, which I traded against a micro PDP, which I thought was a good trade, and the guy I traded it with thought it was a good trade as well, so I guess it was.
Everyone happy?
Oh, this is a cute little system. Ursatron was a part of the East German computer industry. It was a part of Robotron. And Ursatron were their factory control system, so process control. And this is the service and programming unit. So you can either cable this to one of the machines and program it that way and diagnose it that way, or you can put an EEPROM in this socket here and write a program and put it on the EEPROM. The interesting thing about it, because it's East German, is that it doesn't use a regular pitch for the chips. Rather than the pins on the chip being placed 0.1 inch apart or 2.54 millimeters, the pins are placed 2.5 millimeters apart. So a regular EEPROM almost fits, but it doesn't quite. The last two legs get bent, which is unfortunate. I really love that display. A couple of teletypes that came in. The left one's a regular one. The right one has been ruggedized and outfitted with an electronic keyboard for the Dutch police. They had one of these in each police station, and people, originally they had like mechanical, like original teletypes. Police agents started complaining that they made too much damn noise, and then they got these big, they're a big metal case around it with foam inside, and they're much quieter. Oh, this is nice. This is a Carrion prototype. Carrion stands for Car Information and Navigation. And this was one of the first sat-nav systems. Well, it wasn't sat-nav because they didn't have satellites yet. It was based on compass heading and distance. So it would tie into the engine of the car to know how fast the car was driving, and then it had a compass that it connected to. And based on that and the map it had, it tried to determine where you were taking a right turn. So this is a prototype, and it's a prototype of basically the first car navigation system produced by Philips. There were a few companies working on things like this at the same time. Philips this was interesting because they had the idea of storing the map data on a CDI disk. But in this system, which is a prototype, the map data is all EEPROMs. So they had this installed in a van, and when people from Audi or Volkswagen came over to look at navigation systems, they would put them in the van and drive them around and show them how it worked. But the map only covered the area between the Philips factory and a village that they then always drove to. So they always pretty much took the same route with a few variation, because that was all the map that fitted in those EEPROMs. And it's got 4 Motorola 68,000, I think 68030 processors in it. Interesting bit of equipment, completely useless. A bit of British glory. This is a Cossar DIDS 400 terminal, which is it's not completely functional. It's doing something, but not quite what it should do. Interesting thing about this one is that the character generation is completely analog. It's got this tube, which I've taken out to photograph it, that sits in the bottom of it, and it's got a plate that has all the characters etched on it. And then the anode is behind that. So the idea is that you, if you want to draw a character, you create a sine wave that goes like this. And then you create a copy of that sine wave on this tube, which also has deflection plate. So you go like this over the character and you just copy the output on the anode to the screen. Because every time when there's where the characters are etched, more electrons go through that plate and reach the anode. If there's no character etched, then it just gets blocked by that plate. So you just amplify that, copy it to the screen. And what they could do that way, and they stored all the characters in a piano wire memory. So it was a loop where all the bits just went round and round and round and round. And what they could do that way was, one, they could create a display that had a refresh frequency of 72 Hertz, which for 1962, which is when this machine was built, was incredible. Plus it had very sharp characters because it was all analog, so the resolution was much higher than you could do with bitmapped character generators. So this was a $100,000 terminal, and it was used mostly by high-level bank employees who were afraid of straining their eyes if they had to look at a regular terminal all day.
Hopefully it had numbers in as well as characters then, if it was
Yes. Yeah. No, it's got a.
I can
it's
see
got a
number
pretty,
7.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. There's the numbers. So it's got a. I think it's a 6x8 matrix of characters, but it didn't have lowercase characters. Hard disks. Hopefully, I've now got 4 of these Fujitsu Eagle SMD drives. I've got 4 of these. I'm hoping that I can make one functional one out of them for use with the Convex C1 and finally get that going. Picked up some IBM RS6000 stuff. WAN VS system with the covers off. And then I have one bit that I'm currently working on. I'm trying to get a deal going where I can acquire this. That's an IBM 360 Model 30 mainframe. There's also a 360 Model 20 mainframe that's not in this picture. Hard disks with cartridges that you screw in from the top, holding a whopping 5 megabytes. Console typewriter on a table that attaches to the mainframe. A card sorter, printer, basically a fairly complete IBM 360 Model 30 and Model 20. I'm hoping to acquire that, but we're still negotiating a bit. So hopefully the guy I'm negotiating with doesn't see this presentation and realizes that I really want to get it. So that's pretty much what I have for you today. And so this is my website, vaxbar.com, if you're interested. And I hope to be back next year with good news about the IBM 360. If there are any questions, just let me know.
Cheers, thank you very much.
I probably went over my time again.
No, that's fine. If everyone interested.
We're a bit popping out.
I think we're a bit ahead of schedule, so my plan now is just to have a walk around and take the guys who couldn't come here on a Zoom call around. So if I'm just kind of in your face, don't be alarmed. It's just trying to share it a bit. Other than that, I think that's it. I think that's all the formal stuff done now. So because I know some people like to get off early. But thank you very much for coming. And we'll sort out a date for next year. I've promised Steve Davidson that I'll try and get a date that fits in with him and his Amazon, not Black Friday type weekends, and hopefully he can come in person next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you for setting it up. My memory's not very good.
Oh yeah, don't forget to pay your bill.
Front panel. I know Holland's a big place from someone in Holland. It wasn't you.
No.
It
There's
sounded just,
Boyan.
I can't remember the guy's name.
There's a few guys who
Yeah, but anyway, the shock for me was because we just left the EU, so he shipped it to me,
Right.
and then I got the tax bill.
Oh, right, yes. The import duty and... Right.
First time it's happened, you know.
Yes. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Consumption, if you've got all your machines, which consume the most power, the one you mentioned?
The C220. Well, I have a C240, which is the 4CPU model of the same system. That requires too much power for my connection to the grid. Yeah. Now I've got a 3x 35 feet house. That system. Well, yes, yeah, but it would require close to 3x 50 amps, just the CPU. So. No, that's the advantage. Of getting something like that, it not working and then getting
Right.
I think we'll have that one.
You're going to take that one. Right. Do you want me to? I'll just. You're going to be here for a bit, aren't you?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I'll just go that way around the room. Yeah. Just get Trevino. Sorry.
Well, you know, he's got but he wasn't allowed anymore. And I was asking him and he said, no, it's just an array of standard pieces. So unlikely that's what he said. Yeah, so it's just a big grid of standard PCs.
Well, basically the RLX system I showed you, the small system, that is 24 standard PCs.
Yeah, I remember we talked about VMS and digging into
So it's the Great Northwest Arrow.
consultants, and I went to GSK, they having problems with their Oracle database, and I was at DBA performance they were getting from just because the database is separate from the rest of the system. So I moved the data off there, can't remember what model it was, mega money one, onto a laptop. And I thought, really big pictures. Improved. Over this big one of still backs. So they asked me to just see what they say. Just leave. But basically their Oracle database just needed more memory really. So I managed to prove that by just putting it on a laptop. And I was asked to leave the building quickly before the IT director got in serious trouble. He spent so much money on it.
Is that not an alpha step? It's huge memory. Oracle and alpha.
I was at, I did BMS stuff at the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture. Well, this was before I really started using this. This is when I was an applications manager. And we had an application that ran on BMS on PS40. With an underlying Oracle database. finance department in like their a purchase order or something like that, they would hit F6 and it would just say working for 30 seconds, and then finally came back and then it did the next one, which of course is completely unworkable. So what do you do? They started throwing hardware at it. Hardware.
Yeah.
So the system we had 1 CPU and I think a gigabyte of memory. Okay, let's put in another CPU and another gig. That didn't help. Well, let's order 2 more CPUs and 2 more gigabytes of memory. And I was getting like, hold on guys, let's try and figure out what's going on here, because when I look at monitor, we're nowhere near CPU capacity, we're nowhere near memory capacity, we're maxing out on excessive disk access, and we need to figure out why it's doing so much I/O. And
Because the memory buffers weren't big enough, probably.
yeah, what was I started looking into it, and this is a huge database, and it was all running in what I call in Oracle, we use the statistics, cost optimized. And so I started looking at statistics, and they had to generate statistics once. And they hadn't done it empty, and they never done it since. So now you have all these tables that have millions of rows of data in it, but the statistics says the table is empty. So Oracle starts doing a full table scan every time. So I generated that, so we generated statistics and everything was just fine and we hit F6 and my spec comes back immediately. Then we had another problem because they had not communicated to the people in the finance department that they were working with the issue. And these people by now have been used to waiting for 30 seconds for several years. So when it immediately came
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
that can't be right. So they put it in again and again. So someone who was meant to be paid once now entered 3 times.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Yeah, invariably. Nine times out of 10, they just haven't put enough memory to give Oracle stuff. Put as much in memory as you can.
Yeah.
So
If it
go
allows
to
enough
this. If you don't go to this, it's fast. Very, very simple. So I've got a lot of money being paid just to tell people that. Easy job.
Yeah, no sensible amount of money could have fixed this issue.
Yeah. So you first of all to convince them you know these tools.
Right.